Hey Valley Middle School, welcome to another math video. Today we're going to be working with rounding fractions, and I really break this down into three specific targets. But before we get started on all those targets, let's take a quick look at our trivia question for the day. What did legend Babe Ruth put in his baseball cap to keep cool? We'll be back to the kind of a nutty answer to that one when we're done with instruction. All right, officially then, these are the targets I want to look at. I can round fractions to the nearest zero, half, or whole. I can round mixed numbers to the nearest whole number, and I can estimate sums or differences. Make sure that you're watching either all of these or the specific parts of this that I've asked you to, because I've broken it down into three sections, so you might want to double check your homework assignment. Let's do this thing. All right, so Casey ate 9/16 of one apple pie and 7/8 of a second apple pie. Estimate the amount of pie he ate to the nearest half or whole. Well, 9/16. Well, 8/16 is a half, so this is really close to a half of a pie he ate there. 7/8, well, 8/8 is a whole, so 7/8 is really close to the whole, so we'll call that one a whole. And then we've got the whole pie he ate plus the half pie. It would be 1.5 pies. What we're going to be working with today is just as simple as that. I've got a couple of ground rules, one for fractions and one for rounding mixed numbers that'll help you. But the main point of my lesson today is you have to stay flexible in your thinking. Does your answer make sense for that specific situation? All right, let's go on and take a peek at our first one. All right, this is going to be rounding fractions. So we round fractions to the nearest zero, half, or whole number. That means, is it closer to 0, is it closer to half, or is it closer to a whole? Let's take a look at this example, 4 12s. Here's 4 12s, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So right here, is this closer to 0? Is it closer to the half line, the half mark, or is it closer to the whole? Pretty simple when we think about it that way. Sometimes I think about it as a teeter-totter. Would it balance right in the middle? Is it close enough to make it balance? Would it lean? Would it lean the other direction? So in this case, it's really pretty close to a half. And so I would call that half. All right? Remember to stay flexible in your thinking and think about the situation. Most of the time, these rules will apply. So let's take a look at some examples then. Using our little fraction bar up here, 0, half, and a whole, 3/5, well, 3/5, we go down to the 3/5 thing, 1, 2, here's the 3/5 line, that would be closer to 1/2 than it is 1 whole, so we would call that 1/2. Here's 8/9 down here. Look at, it's so close over here to 1 that we would certainly call 8/9 1 whole when we're estimating. 4/9 on the other hand, that's right here, 4/9, I guess I'd call that a half. Look how close that is to the halfway mark. All right. 1/5 right here, well, it's certainly closer to 0, so I would probably just estimate that fraction as 0. And I know that seems weird, but again, you have to think about the situation. Sometimes we need to be more exact, but most of the time estimates are just close, a reasonable or close answer. 9/12, this is kind of one of those weird yeah buts. So here I am at 9/12, and it's exactly halfway between 1/2 and 1. Again, you have to think about the situation when you're doing that. I'm going to try to avoid questions like that on the test, because if I do put it on the test, I certainly can't have both answers down. But think about the situation. Most of the time, I usually just round up to 1. All right. We've got my good friend here, Cajun Man, in to help us give us a little bit of advice. Cajun Man, what do you got to say?
You can do it!
All right, that means he wants you to try these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over here by yourself. Go ahead and pause. All right, let's see how you did. 3/9, where is it? 3/9 down here. 3/9 would be right here. That's a little bit closer to 1/2 than it is to anything else. So 3/6, that would be 1/2. 1/6 is pretty close to 0. And 4/5 and 7/9 are both very close to 1. All right? Let's maybe have you try a couple more here. So round these fractions to the nearest 0, half, or whole so we can estimate a sum or a difference. Now we're getting a little bit more complicated in the wording, but we're still doing the same thing. Go ahead and pause and give it a shot. All right, let's see. 29 30-seconds, that's almost a whole because 32 30-seconds would be a whole. 1/16, that's pretty far away from 8/16, which would be a half, so this is definitely a 0. 3 50-seconds, that's going to be closer to 0. 8/9, that's almost a whole, so we call that a whole. 7/12, well, 6/12 would be a half, so 7/12 is really closer to 1/2. And then, well, here's a weird one, 3/16. Well, 4/16 would be a quarter, right? So really, following my rules, 3/16 is closer to 0, but some people might call that a quarter, and that's where I need you to be flexible. Go, okay, yeah, in this situation, yeah, rounding that to a quarter would be good. Same way with 5/24. 12/24 would be a half. 6/24 would be a quarter. So my rule says to round it to 0, but in some situations you might want to just put that as a quarter too. The main thing is to be flexible. Cajun Man, what did you want to add to that?
Be flexible, mon ami. You can do it.
That's right, you can do it if you're flexible. All right, let's keep rolling here. That rounds out rounding fractions and some practice error. Here we go to rounding mixed numbers. Now here the rule is we want to round it to the nearest whole number. So when I think about 3 and 2/16, I can just set my 3 aside because I know I got 3 wholes. So now I'm looking at 2/16. Now if I put that on the scale, would that be closer to 0 or would it be closer to 1? And here we're fully on the teeter-totter. It would never balance in the middle. It would just tip one way or the other. This one here, 2/16, it's gonna go to the 0. It's just not close to 1/2, and it's not close to 1. So we would just call this 0 and then just call this 3 if we were estimating with it. On the other hand, if I were to change this number over here to, I didn't mean to do that, 12/16, and now we're getting a lot closer to 1. And so in this situation, we'd round this to 1 and tack it on here, giving a final answer of 4. Okay? Stay flexible. Be thinking about the situation. All right, so let's do a couple here. 4 and 2/3. Well, 2/3 is going to be over here someplace, so that's going to be closer to 1. 6 and 3/5. Well, 2.5 would be right here. So 3/5 is on this side, so we would round that to 6. 12 and 2/8. Well, 8/8 is going to be over here. 4/8 is going to be in the middle, so we're definitely on this side, closer to 0, so that would just be 12. Same with 3 and 1/5. 1/5 will be here someplace, and so it's going to be closer to 0, so we would just call that 3. 41 and 4/6. Well, this would be 3/6, so 4/6 is going to be on this side, tipping it to a whole, so it would be 42. All right? You guys pause and try these ones on your own before I let you hear from Cajun Man again. Go ahead. All right, let's see how you did. 4 and 3/8. Yeah, you're right. 4. It's closer to 4. 3 and 5/6. That's also closer to 4 because 5/6 is so close to a whole, we would just round that up. 12 and 1/2. Here's kind of a yeah, but so what if it's right smack dab in the middle? Well, you can go to round up, you can round down. Sometimes I even leave it in the middle and maybe convert to decimals and subtract. But for this case, in general, if you had to ask me, what do you do every time? I would say round up. 11 and 1/4, certainly closer to 11, and 8 and 7/9, that's closer to 9. All right, Cajun Man, any additional thoughts?
It is your turn to try, my friend.
All right, I guess you're going to have to do a few more for Cajun Man. Why don't you go ahead and round these mixed numbers to the nearest whole. Go ahead and pause it. All right, let's see how you did. 5 and 4/5, that rounds up to 6. 6 and 13/30. Well, 15/30 would be a half. So this is on this side. So we would just leave it at 0 or 16. 21 and 9/10, that's really close to 22, so 9/10, 10/10 would be 22. 7 and 2/9, that's going to be over on this side. Again, think about the halfway point would be like 4.5/9, right? So it's on this side. I would just leave it at 7 because that would round to 0, the 2/9. 41 and 4/6. Well, 4/6, that's going to be over on this side again, so I would round up to 42. Okay? All right. Now you're ready for your target. How's that sound?
Well, that's just dandy.
Oh, thanks, Chris Farley. All right, now our official target for tonight, estimating sums and differences, the third part of it. So we have to know that a sum means the answer to an addition problem. The difference then is an answer to a subtraction problem. An estimate is to come up with a reasonable solution, and we typically do this mentally. So if we're looking at fractions, we have 9/10 minus 7/10. Well, remember, fractions, we round to the nearest 0, half, or whole. So 9/10, that rounds up to 1. 7/10, that's pretty close to a half, because 5/10 would be there. So we would just take that 1 whole minus the half, and we get 1/2. That's what we're going to be doing today on our quiz. Mixed numbers, very similar to what we did. We'll either round up to the nearest whole number or round down to the nearest whole number. So we have 12 and 3/7 minus 6 and 7/10. So I break it down just like this. 12 and 3/7, that's closer to 12. 6 and 7/10, that's closer to 7. 12 minus 7, 5. Mixed numbers are pretty simple because you're just going to think, is it closer to that? Which whole number is it closer to? All right. All right. Let's try a couple examples here. So we got 3 easy steps, and here we're going to be doing fractions. So first of all, with fractions, you round up to the closest 0, half, or whole. So here we have 12/14 plus 1/3. So let's take a look at 12/14. Well, that's closer to 1. 1/3, that's closer to half. So very simply, we've got the 1 plus the 1/2 would give me 1/2. And we have to check, does our answer make sense? Yeah, it's close. This is about 1, this is about a half. 1.5. Sound fair? All right. Is it exact? No, it's not. You can do this, my friend. That's what mon ami means. My friend, it's French. I was a French major, so I throw that in once in a while. All right, you try this one by yourself. Go ahead and pause. All right, let's see how you did. So we had 10/12, and that really is close to 1. And 9/16, that's closer to a half. And this is a subtraction problem, so we just take the 1 minus the 1/2, and we'll get 1/2. Does the answer make sense? Yeah. We got about 1 minus about a half. And that's all we got to do. All right, let's try mixed numbers. Basically, you follow the same steps that we've been doing, except for we don't go to that half step. We just kind of round to the nearest whole. So round the fractions up or down to the closest half or whole. So here we have 3 and 9/16 plus 2 and 1/8. So let's just take a look and see what I did. Well, 3 and 9/16, that becomes 4, because 8/16 would be half, so it tips my scale, it's closer to 4. 2 and 1/8, well, that's really close to 2, because 4/8 would be a half, and then we have to start thinking, but this is really closer to 2, so we just have 4 plus 2, which is 6. All right, what have I got hidden under here? I need you to be flexible. Let me just delete this once. Be flexible. You could also think about this one here as 3.5 plus 2, right? And if you came up with 5.5, would that be a reasonable? Yes, it would be. And so when you're dealing with halves or things that are close to a half, like 9/16, use your judgment and think about the situation, all right? And I know that's being wishy-washy, but when I write the test, I'll make sure that there's one best answer, okay? In case you decide to, be flexible and go to a half on something like this. All right, let's go. Go ahead and try this. Pause and try this one. Oh, I'm sorry, I already had the answers down. Let's skip ahead then. All right, so what about 1/4 and 3/4? Well, these are tough ones, but in this case here, I round up to 1, or in this case here, I rounded to a half. So I rounded them both up in this situation. So 1 minus 1/2 equals 1/2. You can also convert to decimals when you're doing that. You think about that. You could go, well, I could do 0.75 minus 0.25. You can think about money too. All right? All right, I think I've got one for you to try here. Oh no, here was a yeah, but what about when the numbers get really, really super big? The bigger the number, the less important the fractions are when estimating. So here, if I would follow my rules, 48 7/8 plus 50 1/4, 48 7/8 is almost 49, but honestly, I could call that 50 and that would be fine. 50 1/4, I'd certainly call that 50. So I could come up with 49 plus 50 if I use these two numbers, or I could say 50 and 50 and call it 100 too. Again, the key two words here tonight are being flexible and thinking about the situation. But this is a good one to remember, that the bigger the numbers, the wholes are, the less important the fractions are when estimating. All right. I think we are good for the night. I've given you guys a ton. Here's your ticket to the show. Why don't you go ahead and give this a shot? We got one dealing with fractions. This will be to the closest zero, half, or whole you'll be rounding. Here you'll just go to the closest whole numbers. All right. Sweet! Answer to the trivia question. What did baseball legend Babe Ruth put in his hat to keep cool? Cabbage leaves. Whether it actually helped or not, we don't really know. I'm pretty sure there's no research about that, but one thing's for sure, he was an amazing baseball player. Quite honestly, in my personal opinion, I think he was the greatest ever. The only reason I think he was better than Hank Aaron is because he was a pitcher as well. He was an amazing athlete and an amazing pitcher. The true home run king is not Barry Bonds. I think it's Hank Aaron. Barry Bonds used steroids to help him stay healthy and be stronger, and that just is not smart. So, thank you very much for listening. Sorry about the baseball dialogue. Have a good evening.